I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 67 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23rd, 2022, and therefore, members can attend in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Should any technical challenges arise, please advise me. Please note that we may need to suspend a few minutes as we need to ensure that all members are able to participate fully. Pursuant to Standing Order 1083H and the motion adopted by the committee on Wednesday, December 7th, 2022, the committee resumed its study of foreign interference and threats to the integrity of democratic institutions, intellectual property, and the Canadian state. I would now like to welcome our witness today. As an individual, Pascal Fournier, former President and Chief Executive Officer at the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation and full professor at the University of Ottawa Faculty of Law. Ms. Fournier, the floor is yours for a 5-minute opening statement. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to start by saying that I did not ask to testify here. I received a summons, and as a lawyer, my first reaction was to ask that the House respected my confidentiality and loyalty to the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation, and if I was asked to reveal confidential information that I would have had access to, that there would be a parliamentary privilege, and that was confirmed in writing, and that is of constitutional nature. And so I will cooperate with my responses. But I did have access to a lot of confidential information, and that is normal as president. From July 2018 until April 2023. I was part of the first cohort of 2003. As a fellow, I was working on my PhD, and the foundation had a significant impact on my life as a researcher. I'm a specialist on human rights, and I teach about the Canadian Charter, and I was sent to Iran, Egypt, and in other countries around the world thanks to the foundation, and I was able to work with marginalized women, and I tried to understand the challenges they face, and I tried to share that with our democratic institutions. I created a podcast on federal judges and on ethics, and ethics is a very important subject to me. And when I was asked to become the CEO and president, I was very touched. They gave me as a mandate to reform our programs, our fellow programs, and our grants program. The foundation didn't have a strategic plan before 2018, and so I suggested a strategic plan that was innovative, and I traveled Canada, and I went to all the provinces and territories, and I invited people from the private sector, public sector, universities to these forums, and we were able to create a strategic plan. We had a leadership curriculum which allowed people to innovate and to bring about a positive change in the system and in the country, and I had a lot of conviction in my mandate. I'm interested in ethics, and one of the important pillars of the strategy was sane governance. So at the foundation, we adopted many policies so that we could have a healthy governance, that there was foreseeability, and we have $125 million. It's not a private foundation, and so we have obligations to be accountable, and we have very healthy governance policies. And we adopted a great number of policies under my leadership in order to ensure this healthy leadership and to make things better for fellows. I will be able to answer your questions. As I stated, I started on July 9th, 2018. That's important because the Chinese donation happened before the start of my mandate. So I had to manage a crisis that did not occur when I was there. And you can understand that it will be difficult to answer questions with regards to people who were there and who weren't there, and I wasn't there at the time. And so I had to examine internal documents to understand, as president and CEO, how I could shed a light on what had happened and to ensure that the board members with a financial role, well, I had the obligation to give them all the information at my disposal so that they could play their roles correctly. And in February, March, and April, it was a significant internal crisis management period, and I am now available to answer your questions. Thank you.
6-minute rounds. Mr. Barrett, please begin for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Professor, for joining us today. The company Millennium Golden Eagle that actually made the donation of $140,000, does it seem like a real company with ongoing business operations, or is there something peculiar about this business based on your observations?
So let me say that in the process for me of understanding the past, again, my first reaction was to find the reçu de charité.
The charitable receipt that had been given at that time. There were two that were signed by my predecessor, Maurice Rosenberg, and once I saw the receipts, I had a couple questions.
One mentions an address in China with the name of that company, but without the name of the two donors that were mentioned in the contract that was signed on behalf of these two donors, on behalf of the foundation, signed by Alexandre Trudeau, and on behalf of the University of Montreal. So the names of these two donors do not appear in 2016 on the receipt that was issued by the Pierre-Elliott Trudeau Foundation and signed by Maurice Rosenberg, and the address was in China. The second receipt in 2017 is different from the first one. So the name of the company is there, the address is in Quebec, and the names of the donors are there. I immediately started to ask questions about, why is it that we would have two receipts that are so different, that one seems to be international with money that seems to come from China, and another one with an address in Quebec. And I looked with the CFO, Caroline Lin, who was working with me on that file. We tried to understand what was sent to the government. Alors, je vais vous dire, il y a deux aspects.
So there are two aspects to issuing receipts. they need to be sent to the CRA. So my first reaction was to try to understand what had been sent, why the receipts were different. And secondly, we had our annual report. So for the one from 2016 and 2017, it's an obligation that we have been given by the government. Our partner is ISED. We need to make our annual report public. It needs to be shared on our website. It's sent to the government. It is approved by our board and then is sent to the government. And I tried to take the different pieces of the puzzle, and I realized that in the annual report for 2016 and 2017, both of which are public, the name of the company is not there, but the names of the donors are. So there's public information that is shared, but on the receipt, the information was different than what was posted in the annual report and what was shared to the CRA. And so I did more in-depth research at that time to understand with emails. I had access to emails that were sent before I arrived from a Chinese association that was writing to employees of the foundation, and they were asking them to mention certain information on the receipts. So the association was sending information to employees
in China, and so on. Alors, j'ai pu reconstituer.
And so I was able to see what happened, but I need to specify that I wasn't there. I wasn't president at that time. I only have access to partial information.
Ask you a couple quick questions. I'm running short on time. I appreciate your precision on that issue. So you did make mention of documents. So I'm going to ask up front, ma'am, if there are documents, emails, notes, meeting minutes, receipts, or other material that are germane to our discussions today with respect to our investigation on foreign interference and the attempt of foreign influence by the organizations that you've mentioned today, any materials of that nature, would you undertake to provide those to this committee as part of your testimony today?
Écoutez, comme je l'ai mentionné au début,
as I mentioned at the beginning, I have an obligation for loyalty and confidentiality to my former employer. So I would have to say no, and it is your prerogative. If you want to have access to documents, you have the right to request that, and you have the parliamentary privilege that goes beyond professional secret, but I will cooperate with your requests. But my immediate reaction would be to not give you these documents, but if you insist, yes.
Seconds left. So you talked about how it was reported, how the donation was reported in your annual report, and how the receipts were made for Canada Revenue Agency. Is it your contention then that if the donations were not received from the individuals who were named in your filing, in the foundation's filing with CRA, that the foundation then did lie to Canadians in what was reported in their annual report?
Very quick response, please.
Ce que je peux vous dire,
what I can tell you is that it was my intention to ask lawyers to shed a light on this issue, and as president, I asked what I needed to do. Did I need to contact the government? And I said to say that there was inexact information in the report, and what were my obligations.
A voluntary disclosure, what do I have to say to CRA, what do I have to say to ISED? And so I seeked legal advice and guidance in order to correct the information that was sent and that was made public to Canadians. Again, remembering that this is public money, not the donations, but the foundation, right? Alors, c'était dans mon devoir.
And it was my duty to do so.
Madame Fournier, I am
Thank you, Ms. Fournier.
on that time, so I'm going to keep that in mind for this first round for the other members of the committee as well. Ms. Hepner, you have 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je veux remercier aussi Madame Fournier pour être ici avec nous ce matin. Je sais que ce n'était pas votre choix, mais c'est apprécié quand même. Vous n'étiez pas là en 2001 quand la
Ms. Hepner,
fondation...
please hang on. We do have a point of order. I'm sorry. Mr. Barrett?
There's no English language translation.
Okay. I've stopped the time. There is no English language translation. We're going to work on that right now.
I just forgot to turn on my microphone. Apologies.
Ms. Hepner, your time was stopped. Please continue. Go ahead.
Merci.
Thank you. I was saying that you weren't there in 2001 when the foundation was created, but could you summarize briefly how and why it was created? What was the initial mandate? And how did the foundation evolve over the last 22 years?
In 2002, the federal government endowed the Pierre-Elliott Trudeau Foundation with the Advanced Research in the Humanities and Human Science Fund, so $125 million. And the foundation is living off of the interest. So we cannot spend that $125 million. We invested and we use it to fund PhD students from Canada and across the world who do innovative research in around 4 themes. So human rights and dignity, responsible citizenship, Canada and the world, and people and their natural environment. We are also, the foundation is committed to leadership. So how do we appoint mentors and fellows? So mentors are coming from different sectors, former Supreme Court justices, people in the business sector, movie artists, and so on. As we say in French, la crème de la crème à travers le pays. And the fellows are university professors who are also experts around these themes that should interest all Canadians. And the role of the foundation is actually to bring impact and leadership training for these PhD students. So I was a scholar for the first 3 years of the foundation. It had a tremendous effect on my life, on my vision of research, and the necessity to actually democratize knowledge, disseminate knowledge, and make it accessible to Canadians across the country and the world as well. Et je vous dirais que dans les derniers...
And I would say that in the past few years, we were working internationally. So I had a partnership with France, and we were in Spain last January. And we wanted to be sure that PhD students, and we were choosing quite a few, and we had a very rigorous selection process, and we wanted them to have a real impact in the world. And to do so, we need to democratize language at universities. They really focus on going in depth in information, and we wanted to make things more understandable.
And go to the public sector, government, NGO, outside of the university world, and address the most complex issues that should interest all Canadians. Alors, on ne pouvait le faire.
And we could only do that through exceptional generosity from fellows, and we created public interaction programs. So we went to certain cities in Canada, certain countries in the world with fellows and mentors, and we were able to explore scientific questions, high-level questions, while making them accessible and while giving these fellows the tools that they needed in order to democratize their expertise. It was a colossal amount of effort, and it was exceptional for what we could give them. I can tell you about my first 3 years at the foundation that were exceptional and the last 5 that were also exceptional. We celebrated our 20th anniversary last November, and we welcomed a couple hundred people, and there were people who were there to help, mentors. When we're doing a PhD, we're often alone with our committee of supervisors, but then the foundation helped offer a family to these fellows.
Fantastic answer. I occasionally like to listen to the Peter Mansbridge podcast during my commute, and this topic came up during one discussion, and Chantal Hébert, a very respected longtime journalist, talked about her experiences. She disclosed that, her experiences, she participated in the program, she saw how much good it did. What other sort of people would you say are involved in these programs? And I'd like to, maybe you can reflect a bit more. You said it really changed your life as a researcher, and I'd like to hear more about that impact.
In about 45 seconds, please.
5 seconds, it's going to be hard. Well, I did my PhD on issues of human rights and women's rights in the Middle East, and it did allow me to go on the field to teach women's rights in Iran, for instance, which was thanks to the foundation, but taking risks and serious risks. So going there and building relationships and partnerships, I would say, with different groups, and to understand that, despite our differences as human beings all over the world, there's a lot that we have in common. And if we work with good faith and with good intention together, we can do great things. And so the foundation allowed me to dream big and to build an ethical, I would say, platform for the future when I became a university professor and taught the Canadian Charter, accessibility to justice, and so on. So I was very proud and privileged to bring that back to the foundation and to make sure that we had a strategic plan that would protect the foundation and policies that would ensure that governance was good governance, and that we could correct the past if something did happen or not, but I am a firm believer in transparency.
Merci beaucoup. One of the worst jobs of being chair is having to cut people off. We did extend in the first and the second round. I'm going to continue that courtesy for Monsieur Villemure and Mr. Green aussi. Monsieur Villemure.
Monsieur Villemure, you have 6 minutes, maybe a little more. But please start your 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madame Fournier, for being with us. Can you tell us why you stepped down as President and CEO? Yes, as I mentioned, we had a crisis that we had to face. There was an article published on February 28th in the Globe and Mail about interference and that the foundation had been used for reasons other than a simple donation. At that time, I created an emergency committee to try to find a solution. Do we refund the donation? And that is, in the end, what we did. You must understand that this was before my time, so I tried to put the puzzle back together. Yes, I'm getting there. And so I wanted to refund the amount. The check was signed by 2 board members who are still members now. The check came back to us, and when it did, I did more research with my CFO, Caroline Lin, to try to understand what the issue is. There were different addresses, the receipts were different, and we wanted to understand what was going on. And with the research that I did, I realized, and I wasn't aware of that during the first 4 years of my mandate, so I realized that an association, a Chinese association, was communicating with the employees of the foundation. And not to talk about conferences on China, they were giving clear directives on what needed to appear on receipts issued by the foundation, and I found that troubling. And I also realized that there was a Chinese address, whereas in the annual report, it was a Canadian address. And so there were all of these things that I wanted to shed a light on. And as president, I wanted to know what to do with the federal government, with the CRA. I needed to share that there were inaccuracies. At that time, I worked with legal specialists, and I asked them 6 questions. And I was able to work on these 6 questions to play my role as president. I was ready to stay 2 extra years. My mandate was coming to an end on July 9th. I had signed a renewal thanks to the trust of my board, so 2 extra years as president. So I was ready to stay. However, my conditions were that I needed to be able to shed a light on what happened and have confidential legal advice. I wasn't going to make all of that public, but I wanted to shed a light on all of the things that didn't match up and examine the emails sent by China. And so I wanted to go forward with this. There was some friction with the board on the mandate that was going to be given. I wanted my mandate to be very large and exhaustive, that would enable me to answer those 6 questions, but there was friction with the board and the trust was broken. 8 of us resigned on April 10th, on Easter Monday, and so trust was broken with regards to shedding a light on what had happened. And I just want to conclude by saying that when we're shedding a light on this, it's important to guarantee the independence of the investigation process. So I wanted to work with accountants and lawyers, and my CFO and I had found a lot of information, and we wanted to give that information to those experts and recuse ourselves from the process. But the people who were part of committees, we wanted them as well to recuse themselves, because if we were to stay, then it could have an impact on the process. A journalist could have said, well, it's not an independent process. And as you know, I am part of the Access to Information Act. I didn't want our processes to be attacked. They could have said you had people who were sitting on the board who were a part of the investigation, and so I wanted them to recuse themselves. I had received legal advice, and I wanted everyone to recuse themselves before the process started, and that was also what the 8 board members who resigned wanted. 1 minute. Were you intimidated during your time as president and CEO? Or did they threaten legal action against you? Nobody mentioned a legal action against me. Meetings with the board were a little rough. and heated. Things were said about me that I believe were not justified, and certain board members also believe that it wasn't justified, that I was acting in bad faith in wanting to ensure that certain members recuse themselves. As a lawyer and following legal advice, my intentions were good. I wanted to protect the foundation, and as an ethics specialist, and as I mentioned this year, I created a podcast for the nomination of judges in Canada, and I worked with 2 appeal court judges from Quebec and Manitoba, and so I understand what is required. And often we want to go beyond so that nobody can attack the investigation process. That protects the process, and it would protect me as well, because all I had to do at that time with my CFO, who also demissioned or stepped down the same day as I did. Thank you, Madame Fournier. Mr. Green?
We're probably about 23 minutes now, so you have 6 minutes plus.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for being before us today, Ms. Fournier. Your testimony has been really, really helpful. I'm going to ask you a series of questions in a rather rapid-fire way. Please don't take it personal if I interject to take my time back to move on to the next question. I will ask you to the best of your ability to answer questions as briefly as you can and as directly as you can, given the complexity of the situation. And I'm going to pick up with where my friend from the block left off. You had mentioned that you had raised some concerns internally with the board and that you wanted to flag with the federal government and the CRA as per your obligations to ISED and the CRA. Did you end up doing that? You sought legal advice, but I wasn't clear. Did you end up flagging those issues?
I actually never received the legal advice. So this is why we got to where we got. And I resigned along with 8 board members. I wanted to get the legal advice, and I had 6 questions that I needed answer. And
what were those questions?
I have the email that was sent at the time here to the executive committee. It's a privileged and confidential email that was sent with the lawyers, being in CC. I have outlined in that email the 6 questions that I was asking.
Okay, I'm gonna interject now.
Yes.
And I'm gonna demand that you submit those letters to the committee. I know that you are loyal to the board given your confidentiality, but you do recognize the parliamentary privilege that we have. And so I will request that you submit those documents to this committee. We will endeavor, Mr. Chair, if I could can I point of order myself? Yeah. Could I ask, okay, if you could pause. I want to know if within the context of this committee, if I could request these documents to be viewed confidentially within the committee at a later date, but so as to alleviate Ms. Fournier from her obligation, that I would ask that those documents be submitted and that the committee review them in camera at a later date. Is that okay, Mr. Chair?
So I'm going to go to the clerk on that one. Procedurally, Mr. Green, I can't answer that question. I'm just not aware of that. But Madam Clerk, if you can help us out, that would be great. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Green, I've been advised that we can ask for those documents. It would be a motion of the committee to determine the undertaking of those documents. Furthermore, to your point on the confidential nature, that would have to be part of the motion for the committee to deal with those documents in a confidential manner. Obviously to protect privilege, but also to make sure that the committee has everything it needs in order to determine.
In fairness to Ms. Fournier and understanding our parliamentary privilege, Mr. Chair, I'm going to request that those documents be submitted to the committee in an in-camera fashion, in a confidential fashion, privilege to the committee. At a later date, perhaps, Mr. Chair, we can determine whether or not we want to make those public, but I'd like to move that motion right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. So I have stopped the time. The motion has been moved by Mr. Green for Madame Fournier to submit those documents and that the committee deal with those documents on a confidential basis. I have to deal with this right now. Do I have consensus on the part of the committee to, we do? I see consensus over here, consensus over here.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I agree with Mr. Green's motion, but can you clarify what the document request is?
Mr. Green, perhaps you can clarify what I'm taking from Mr. Green that everything perhaps that Ms. Fournier has available to her that was submitted to the committee. So, Mr. Green, am I correct in that assumption?
That is correct. Yes.
So to be clear, Chair, that is consistent with what I had suggested in the first round. That was all the
Yep.
information
Yep.
That was germane,
Yep.
and that would be captured by this motion by Mr. Green.
I expect that it is. He's nodding his head. The only difference is, and this is where I needed clarification from the clerk, is how we dispose of that on a confidential basis, and we would need a motion to deal with that confidentially and for the undertaking of the documents. So that's clear. So on the motion, I see Mr. Fergus's hand. I saw you nod with consent before. I assume that
Mr. Chair,
you're still in that space.
I think this is, of course, of interest to the committee. I would suggest, however, that we table this, allowing Mr. Green, perhaps when it's not on his questions or to consult with his research team or with other members to come up with a precise motion, and we deal with this before the end of this meeting today.
On the part of everybody for the committee to receive these documents. That's what I'm sensing on a confidential basis. So, Mr. Green, if you want to table this, are you okay with that?
Yep.
Okay.
I just want to get to the heart of the matter. I want to respect the witness's commitment to her board and also understanding the constitutional nature of our parliamentary privilege. I will proceed with my round. I think I'm at about 2 minutes right now.
Actually, no.
Okay, that's okay.
I'm sorry,
that's
Madame
okay.
Fournier,
no.
because we are going to continue, but we're going to continue with Mr. Green's line of questioning, okay? And perhaps at some point, if you want to make a point during your answer, you can do that, but please respect the member's ability to ask the question. And Mr. Green has already stated that he's asking them in a pointed fashion and short responses. Go ahead, Mr. Green. You have 4 minutes and 10 seconds left.
Thank you very much. Ms. Fournier, you had mentioned you had some tension at the board. We noted that you had also mentioned that people had left subsequent to that tension. You had raised this issue. You certainly are a very learned academic expert in law and constitutional matters, in board governance, and yet there was friction with the board. Whom was the friction with?
Well, we had 14 board members for a total possible of 18 board members, but at the time, 14 board members. And there's a motion that was circulated by one of the board member, Ginger Gibson.
Which board member?
Ginger Gibson, who's a former scholar as well. She had sent a motion suggesting that those who were in a conflict of interest or an apparent conflict of interest would recuse themselves. And she suggested that a committee of 3 members with one possible alternate member would deal with this matter.
I'm going to interject now. I'm going to ask, who were the members that she deemed to be in apparent conflict? If you could name them now, please.
She did not name them. What she did was the opposite, was to say, I would like to suggest a committee with members who were not there at the time, so who were appointed on the board after 2018. And that committee, and only that committee, would be responsible for overseeing the law firm and the accounting firm that had to answer these questions that I had regarding these Chinese donations.
I'm going to interject again. Just so that I'm clear, was Alexandre Trudeau a part of the board prior to those members joining the board? Would he have been one of the people that predated the decision for this donation?
Yes, Alexandre Trudeau currently is not on the board of directors. He's a member, but at the time he was on the board of directors and on the executive committee, which is the committee representing the board at the time of these donations.
Sure. I just noted that he had requested to attend committee in this fashion regarding this, and that's why I'm raising it. Did you at any time, as the executive member presenting to the board, did you ever receive direction from the board that you felt might have been counter to your rules and regulations or any laws that pertaining to the CRA or ISET in your reporting? Was there anything that you felt was contrary to the best interest of the organization that you perceived as direction from the board?
I will confess that I am a lawyer emeritus, avocate émérite du Barreau du Québec. I had called the Quebec Bar. The CFO had called herself l'Association des comptables agréés du Québec. We both came to the conclusion that in order to continue working for the foundation as upper management, that we had to build that process, and building that process meant that those who were there at the time would recuse themselves from any meetings regarding dealing with that Chinese donation, dealing with the law firm, dealing with the accounting, that the kind of decision-making process had to be totally independent, and they had to recuse themselves. And that is the...
And they refused, is that correct?
Excuse me?
They refused to recuse themselves?
Well, there was a motion that was circulating, and this motion, received several votes from other board members around, but they did not recuse themselves from these meetings, from the meetings that we had with the board. And they
Who voted against?
Excuse me?
Who voted against?
I don't have access to all of my documents, I have to say, because I had to give back pretty much everything. It's very limited what I have. But several emails were sent from board members who, some of the board members who are currently on the board of director, Bruce McNiven, Peter Salas, who would send emails back to make corrections around, the mandate itself, what the mandate should be. And that was the tension at the board level, that the other board members would say, well, you have to recuse yourself. We want a committee that's totally independent. And that was at the heart of the tension.
Last question. Knowing what you know about the law and about your obligations and about the fiduciary duties that you have in board governance, is it safe to say that all of the people who resigned did so because they were quite aware of the apparent conflict of interest? They were quite aware of a donation that was not a simple donation, a very complex donation with complex implications politically, given the nature of the name of this foundation, the name of the Prime Minister, the people involved. Did you step down because you weren't comfortable with your own legal standing?
Very, very quick response.
Yes, I had to step down, and the board members, the 8 board members who stepped down with me on that day, the Monday, and not the It's not the entire board that resigned together. I mean, there were different resignations. There was a block of the majority of the board on Monday, April 10th, that resigned because there was a trust issue and there was this tension regarding recusing some members who were asked to recuse themselves. Alors, c'était une rupture.
And so it was trust that was broken in order to shed a light and to protect the foundation. Thank you, Ms. Fournier. Thank you, Mr. Green. We're going to start with our second round of questions. We have time for 2 5-minute rounds, one for the Conservatives and one for the Liberals. 2.5 minutes for the Bloc and the NDP.
Lines here, we went way over on that first round. And I will say that as we start the second hour, I'm going to reset so that we have very similar to the first round. So each party will have 6 minutes at the beginning of that round. Monsieur Berthold, vous avez la parole.
Mr. Berthold, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witness for being with us. I feel like your testimony raises more questions, even, and I believe that we'll get answers in the documents that you'll be sending us. So you were made aware of the donation through the cultural organization. What is that organization and what seemed abnormal? We had a donation contract which mentioned 2 donors personally with their personal addresses in China with the University of Montreal and the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation. So on July 9th, 2018 to the end of February 2023, I believe that the contract reflected reality, that both donors had their names and their addresses, and the letters that Maurice Rosenberg was sending, these letters were sent in English and translated into Mandarin. These letters were sent personally to the donors. Thank you for your donation. They were letters on behalf of the foundation that were thanking these private donors. That was my understanding. You explained that a little bit earlier. So the organization, China Cultural Industry Association, one of the donors was part of that association. That association has ties with the Chinese government. Until the end of February 2023, I didn't know, and in the emails that I had from the foundation, they weren't the donors that corresponded with the association. It was that association. And who had the authority to sign such an agreement? And who was responsible for ensuring that the names represented the donors? At the time, the foundation had a policy called Policy on the Acceptance of Gifts. And in that policy, it was for any donation of $1 million or less. It was the president that had to sign off. And for over $1 million, it needed to be the board, and they would need to adopt a resolution. And so why is it that Mr. Alexandre Trudeau's name is in the agreement? I'm not sure, and I wasn't there at the time. I don't have knowledge of that. So there would need to be some in-depth examination done. And that was one of my questions. Why was it not Maurice Rosenberg's signature? And why were the receipts signed with Mr. Rosenberg's personal signature? And that's why the donation policy is supposed to create transparency. I signed contracts, and so I was also creating the receipts with my signature. If not, so you're saying that a board member like Mr. Alexandre Trudeau does not have the authority to sign on behalf of the foundation. I tried to do some research to understand that, because Carolyn Lynn and I were trying to understand what had happened in the past, and I hadn't found any resolution from the bill that allowed Mr. Trudeau to sign the contracts. I didn't see that in the minutes from the board, but I wasn't there, so I can't say. In the emails that you saw, was there any information on the Cultural Association? Did they have any photos of a Trudeau family member? I do not recall that specifically. Emails mentioned, for example, do not put the donors' names, put the name of such and such a company, and then they would send another email saying, in the end, please put this email, this address instead. I didn't know about these emails before the end of February 2023. And so it seemed to me that I stop doing the research and that I hire experts to shed a light on this. And have you faced any pressure from board members since stepping down, or any other members of the foundation? I am not in contact with any of the board members who are currently active members. And when I resigned, my computer, my phone, these were taken, and so I was not able to send an email to fellows or mentors to let them know that I was leaving. So I'm not in contact with current board members. And so my answer is I have no communication with them. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Beltald. Mr. Fergus, you have 5 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Professor Fournier, for being with us, and thank you for your testimony. I also have a few specific questions, and I agree with Mr. Green. If I have to interrupt you, it's just because I want to make the best use of my time. Professor Fournier, beyond your fiduciary responsibilities to ISED or the CRA, what does the foundation have to do with the Government of Canada? We have ISED as a partner. What does the foundation have other ties with the Government of Canada? I can only speak for my 5 years as president. I didn't have any ties with the government beyond ISED and the CRA. Beyond your, and we're talking about your fiduciary responsibilities. But let me specify. Were there links with between the foundation and the Prime Minister and Cabinet? So while I was president, I did not have any relationship with the Prime Minister's office. Neither with the Prime Minister or his staff? No. Professor Fournier, I have another question for you on all of this. You read the news and you've seen the controversy. Some people mistake the foundation, which shares the last name as the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister. And you've said that there is no obligation there. There's no ties there. I'm responding as Pascal Fournier. As president at the time, I had no relationship there, but I cannot speak on other board members. But I personally did not, and I did not want to either with the Prime Minister's office. And the foundation, under your governance, did it have any ties with the Prime Minister's office? To my knowledge, no. Your annual reports for almost 10 years, they indicated that the Prime Minister did not work with the foundation. Can you confirm that? Again, I can only confirm from 2018 to 2023. And during that time, I had no ties with the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister was not invited and was not receiving any information, any documents from our board. And so no invitations, no documents. Did the industry minister have any ties during your time as CEO and president? No. Did the minister play a role in naming board members? We have a specific structure, so we can have up to 18 board members. 2 are appointed by ISED. 2 represent the family of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and 16 are 16 regular members. They are appointed by the Assembly of Members. So the government category currently is empty. That means that there has been no appointments made by ISED in order to fill those positions for years. While I was there, there was no appointments. Now for the Assembly of Members, 6 people out of a total of 30 can be named by ISED. Currently, there is only 1 in 6 that represents the government category. There's the possibility of 3 people representing the family. Currently, only Alexandre Trudeau is representing the family, and there are 21 regular member seats. So if I can summarize, out of a possibility of having 9 members named by the government, there's only 1. And that hasn't been filled for years. Thank you, Madame Fournier and Mr. Fergus. 2.5 minutes for Mr. Villemur. Thank you. So we'll try to do our best in 2.5 minutes. At the end of our previous conversation, I asked if you were a victim of intimidation. You said that some people made statements about you. In La Presse on April 12th, a board member stated that there was intimidation and threats. Can you please describe that? I imagine they were anonymous. I can say that board meetings over the past weeks were very heated. I was accused of acting in bad faith because I wanted to shed a light on operations and I wanted people to recuse themselves. I wasn't saying that they had done anything wrong. It was just important for me that this process be done properly. And the meetings happened in a way that I had never seen before, because all the previous meetings were respectful. We were never raising our voices. We were never attacking each other verbally. And at the end, I was being attacked by raised voices and insinuations. That was at an emergency meeting that I had asked for on March 31st. I had done this at the request of 3 members. And during that meeting, I had invited a specialized lawyer. I had invited a crisis management firm, and we talked about people that needed to recuse themselves in our mandate. Apologies, I only have 2.5 minutes, but what were the motivations of the people who were causing you problems? I'm not sure. Again, I wasn't there in 2015, 2016, 2017. I was only able to get an idea of what happened. And I wanted to just stop doing this investigation so that an outside group could do so. Inaudible. I'm not sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Villemur.
Please go ahead.
Ms. Fournier, who raised their voice at you in those meetings?
Alors, écoutez, encore.
Again, I find it difficult to give names. I can't because of my obligations to my former employer.
Giving
But
names.
you can, because you're here before a parliamentary committee, and I've asked you that question. I've put that question to you. I acknowledge that you asked that question under duress of the parliamentary committee, but that question was put to you. Who raised their voice at you at those meetings specifically?
Alors, il y avait deux.
There were two individuals, Bruce McNevin, treasurer, and Peter Salas, who is a board member and president.
Published on April 12, 2023, cites a statement provided by the foundation, says that of the $200,000 donation to the foundation, you had only received $140,000 in the form of two $70,000 payments. As the chair, as the CEO of the organization, did you provide an investigation regarding the payments falling short? What types of policies and follow-ups did you have, given the gap, the $60,000 gap between what was reported to be donated and what was received?
So the last portion of the donation was due on July 1st, 2018, and I started my mandate on July 9th. And the former CEO, Maurice Rosenberg, had not asked to receive that part of the donation. I read the contract, and I didn't have much in the file in terms of the Chinese donation file, but I read the contract and saw immediately that that money had to be spent only to organize conferences around China, the relationship between Canada and China. And given the fact that I was adopting a new strategic plan and going on the field with different cohorts, I had no intention to organize conferences on China. And so the last portion of that donation was not asked, and this was prior to my mandate, and it had nothing to do with the new strategic plan. So I did not do anything in that regard until I received a letter from the dean of the Faculté de droit de l'Université de Montréal, qui était une lettre.
So a letter that was sent to Alexandre Trudeau, and that was physically sent to the foundation and then shared by email. But I was asked to send that to Alexandre Trudeau, and the dean of the Faculty of Law of the Université de Montréal was asking that the money be returned to the Université de Montréal. Alexandre Trudeau had talks with those.
Okay, so that concludes our first hour of testimony. We are, as I mentioned earlier, resetting to 6 minutes per round. And we are going to start. Now, I will tell the committee that we did receive the motion. The clerk has in writing from Mr. Green. It's been sent to translation. I'm hoping that we can have it back in a reasonable time. We'll see. Mr. Cooper, you're next. You have 6 minutes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Madame Fournier. We know from the agreement that there were two so-called donors, purported donors, two individuals. We know, based upon the tax receipt that had been issued, that there had been a company, the Millennium Golden Eagle International Canada, that had been listed. Is that correct?
On the receipt, yeah.
The receipt, yes. And you had cited that there was the China Cultural Industry Association that had been corresponding with staff at the Trudeau Foundation. Do you believe that the source of the donation was the China Cultural Industry Association? The true source?
That's why I wanted to have an audit, right, and a forensic audit with everything regarding that foundation. And the legal advice that I received, again, I want to mention that at the time when we gave back the money with the executive committee of the board and those who were there at the time who signed the check, I did not sign the check myself, signed the check to give back the money. From that moment and in the weeks after, I started to read some of these emails. I had no idea about these emails. And I immediately asked for help from lawyers And the advice that I did receive was, do not give back now. Now that the money was sent back to the foundation, don't give it back now, because we need to understand everything around that donation. So it's not a good idea to send it back. You should just freeze everything, don't touch it, and we're going to ask all of these questions. We will look at the emails at the time, we'll meet witnesses, we'll talk to some of the board members, some of the members, possibly former employees. We'll try to understand what happened with that donation. I cannot answer your question. I was not even there. That's why I wanted to have a forensic audit.
Thank you for that, Madame Fournier. La Presse reported that a foundation document states that one of the foundation's members, who was a director in 2016, phoned a senior staff member of the foundation to say that the real donor was not the same donor as on the tax receipt. Who was that former director and current foundation member who contacted the staff member, as reported in La Presse? Do you know?
Yes, I do know.
And who was that?
So her name is Farah Mohammed. So she's a member, currently not on the board, and was on the executive committee, was on the board at the time. And in the emails that are part of, the file and the server now at the foundation, she was in these emails of that contract itself and so on. And I have no information regarding these donors. I mean, I was not even there at the time.
Who did she say was the donor? Who did
she
she
did not
ask
say.
the check
She did not say
to?
who is the donor.
Okay. Upon your review of the various emails between the foundation and the donation, was there correspondence either to or from officials in the PMO?
Can you repeat your question?
Upon your review of the emails, did you identify any emails between the foundation and officials in the PMO, the Prime Minister's office?
I don't have anything with me now, but I vaguely remember some emails with the PMO and Elise Comtois, who was the executive director. I don't have anything with me, but I believe it was like emails regarding, the kind of press release, because there were articles in the newspaper in 2016 about the Chinese donation. I don't remember precisely. And
there were emails from 2016. Can you elaborate on what those emails were? Why was the PMO suddenly contacting the Trudeau Foundation about this donation?
I have no idea.
You have no idea. And were there other emails that you noted other than in 2016 between Foundation and the PMO?
I have not seen other emails. I immediately, with the CFO, we immediately reached out to the board with emergency meetings and said, we don't want to look into this matter. We want experts to look into these emails and to understand and reconstitute the past. So I don't have more information regarding.
Okay. On March 1st, you issued a statement in which you stated that the foundation had refunded to the donor all amounts received. Those were the precise words in that statement. Of course, the money had not been refunded to the donor. Who was involved in drafting that statement, and why was it stated that the money had been sent back to the donor when, in fact, that had not happened?
I need a very, very quick response, please.
Yes. So It was the executive committee of the board of directors. The two individuals who signed the check are Peter Salas and Bruce McNiven with their own signature. And the drafting of the declaration was done with the executive committee of the board. So Peter Salas, Bruce McNiven, Ted Johnson, Martha Durden, and Diane Adam. We drafted that declaration together with some help from on the communication side. And it was accurate that we were actually on that day issuing a check signed by Bruce McNiven and Peter Salas, physically sent to the address that we had on file. So there was nothing incorrect about that. That was March 1st. The check came back, so they went 3 times. So there was about 2 weeks until the check was finally sent
Mr.
back
Cooper,
to the
I'm going to ask
foundation.
you to pick this up in the next round of questioning, please, because we're over time. Mr. Baines, I believe you're next for 6 minutes. Go ahead, sir, on Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witness for joining us today. My first question, Madam Fournier, is the foundation was set up with a $125 million endowment, which it invests. Is it the foundation's primary source of revenue?
It is, and we at the foundation, we live off the interest. So we can't touch the $125 million. We invest that endowment, and we live off of the interest. It is the primary source. It is public money.
Okay, and what percentage of the foundation's revenues comes from charitable donations?
I don't have the exact number, but it is a small proportion very small proportion compared to the rest of the money that we spend to fund the scholars, fellows, and mentors.
And how many scholarships did the Trudeau Foundation award in 2022?
In 2022, we had 13 scholars, 6 mentors, and 4 fellows.
And do you know how many the foundation's provided since it was created?
Probably 285, around that.
Okay, and what engagement, if any, does the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation take part in during Canada's elections?
I have not witnessed any involvement.
During your term, did you notice any influence at all from other countries or foreign influence agents?
No.
Maybe are there any misperceptions or inaccuracies maybe that have been reported about the Trudeau Foundation that you would like to clear up?
Well, I did mention, as part of this file that I was dealing with, that in December 2016, there was an article in the National Post in which the former CEO, Maurice Rosenberg, talked to the journalists about this Chinese donation. And he mentions, and I will just quote very briefly, he mentions in a letter responding to the Post initial report, Trudeau Foundation President Maurice Rosenberg emphasized that the foundation does not count the $20 million donation from Chinese nationals Bing Zhang and Niu Genzeng as a foreign donations since it was made by a company registered in Canada. So this was a declaration on behalf of the foundation to say that it was not foreign money, that it was Canadian money. This is and that this was in the annual report as well, when in fact the tax receipt itself mentions China. So I think this is something that is misleading to Canadians. And it was indeed, there's a difference between the tax receipt, what it said, mentioning China, and the fact that it was presented publicly and in terms of interviews and publicly in terms of the annual report that is currently on the website of the foundation as Canadian.
Okay, how much time do I have, Mr. Chair?
2 minutes and 22 seconds.
Okay, on the, just back to the donation very quickly, can you, I think you mentioned that you were trying to figure it out, but why was the donation ultimately returned by the foundation? Do you?
Well, we issued a check with the name that was on the tax receipt. We sent it to that address, and they attempted to go several times to this place to find the donors, because obviously you need someone that will receive the check and sign physically that they have received it. So there were several attempts. And finally, they could not find anybody who would take the check, and the check was sent back to the office of the foundation on March 23rd. So from March 1st to March 23rd, there were several attempts to deliver that check.
Of this year? Of this year?
Yeah.
Okay, and it was ultimately returned.
Ultimately returned to the office of the foundation, mentioning that no one did take the check, or no one was there to take this check.
Okay, and so ultimately, what are like the principal objectives of the Trudeau Foundation? Like, to do with that money is to have scholarships awarded, and like, so do you know exactly what that money was used for at any time?
30 seconds, please.
This money was never used because it could only be used to organize conferences around China and the relationship between China and Canada. So it's one of these.
So those conferences never happened?
These conferences never happened, so that money was never spent. It was kind of deferred donation that could only be spent if we were going to meet the contractual obligation of organizing these conferences on Canada and China. And so
the money just came and went. It came, but it never got spent, and then it was tried to be returned. It was returned. It was attempted to return to somebody.
It was attempted to be returned. And as I mentioned, after finding out about the role of that Chinese cultural association industry and so on,
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madame Fournier. Encore, je suis désolé.
Again, apologies.
I don't like that part of my job, but we have to be fair to all members in their time. Monsieur Villemure, vous avez la parole.
Mr. Villemure, you have the floor for 6 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Fournier, you mentioned early on in your testimony that there were Chinese directives that the Foundation received. Can you tell us more? Who was receiving what, and what was your impression? The emails came from that Chinese association that was sending emails to Foundation employees stating what needed to be on the receipts, what names needed to be there or not, what addresses, and so a lot of emails back and forth between employees and that Chinese-based association. And there was an absence of the donors. They were not part of the emails, but the association was saying, or some emails were saying, the donors, thank you, but there was no direct link that I could see between the donors and the foundation. So the link was between that association and the foundation. So it seemed almost to be by a third party. There was about 160 pages requested by the Globe and Mail as an access to information request in 2017. So 160 pages were sent to the Globe and Mail in 2017, which included almost everything: the contracts, employee emails, the copy of tax receipts. This is something that I found out at the beginning of March. But that access to information request was important, and everything was shown. So everything that was in the books. Is this a usual request from donors? No. We have a policy for accepting donations, and I had this adopted at the foundation. And so while I was there, I worked with lawyers to find out who the donor was, what the intentions were, and I did an in-depth analysis of donors before signing anything. And this is something that was being done since 2018 with fellows and mentors so that we could have a healthy governance that was irreproachable. But before I arrived, and from what I could see in the books, there was no verification done on donors or on the contract. Was it examined by lawyers? From what I could understand with my CFO, that wasn't done. You talked about donations having different policies for over or under $1 million. It fluctuates, but often we receive smaller donations. Usually it's people who went through the foundation who will make donations of hundreds of dollars, but large donations are infrequent. Do you often receive donations from countries that don't have links with the foundation? It's the only one to my knowledge. You mentioned tensions in your office just before you stepped down. One of the reasons was that you were asking people to recuse themselves, which I believe is completely normal, and I imagine that they did not want to recuse themselves. Indeed. Who were these people? Ted Johnson from the board, and he was the chair for auditing at the time, financial auditing, so he would sign letters with the CEO, so with Morris Rosenberg, to state that there was no fraud to their knowledge, and he was chair of different committees. Bruce McNevin, who is treasurer currently, at that time, he was also a part of the financial auditing committee. Peter Salas, who was a member of the financial audit committee from 2017 on. And so the request had to do, for me and the 8 members who left, is that people who were there at the time recused themselves. So it was those 3 people that I named. We asked them to self-identify and say, yes, I was there at the time, I will recuse myself. And they were going to recuse themselves from the contract so that they wouldn't have an impact on how it was going to happen. To my legal knowledge, it was reasonable. We haven't heard from Edward Johnson. Edward Johnson is a founding member like Bruce McNevin, so they were there at the very beginning of the foundation. There were members at the beginning, and one of their roles was to name the board. I told you that we could have up to 30 members, so that's quite a lot. So a governance structure of up to 50 people with 10 employees, it's a very small team for such a significant governance. And there were a lot of committees at the time as well. Mr. Johnson had worked with Pierre Elliott Trudeau. He was his executive assistant and was a founding member. And when I stepped down, he was president of the governance committee, the executive committee, a member of the board, and he sat on the finance and investment committee. So he knows the governance structure very well because he's been there for 20 years. And
Monsieur Villemure,
Thank you, Monsieur Villemure.
6 minutes, sir. Please start.
On that note, according to the registered charity information returned for September 1st, 2017 to August 31st, 2018, the total eligible amount of all gifts for which the charity issued tax receipts was $25,374. Given that the donation of $200,000 or 140 actually received occurred in 2016, would that year be an outlier in terms of donations the foundation received?
J'ai pas bien compris. Là, vous prenez l'année 2017 à 2018, is that correct? 2017, 2018?
2017, 2018?
$25,000 the following year.
Écoutez, je peux pas me prononcer.
I cannot talk about the books before my arrival, but I could mention that the donations to the foundation, well, the foundation had not major fundraising activities. We were living with the interest from the endowment to create programs for fellows, and we wanted to. In the last couple of years, we were getting ready to do some fundraising, but it was never a main activity of the foundation.
This is an endowment. I think it was about a $6 million operating budget currently, $156 million. Is that correct? So $6 million for fellows, for board-directed programs, and yet we have a $200,000 endowment that seems to be conditional from, an unverified third-party source, potentially foreign. So in your work, were there any other donor-directed funds? Just a simple yes or no?
If there were other donors, what was your question again? I'm sorry, I cannot hear well.
Donor-directed funds.
Non, on a...
Answer is no. We had individual donors, as I said, former, we had matching grant, for example.
So this was the only donor-directed conditional donation that was provided. In your time, so you brought in a little bit of due diligence through the governance structure to ensure that donors were vetted, that you had a proper board risk analysis. I myself have spent some time on a pretty solid historical board here in Hamilton, and I know that we had lots of policies, eyes wide open for every donor, and yet it didn't exist before you got there. So I'm just wondering, like, in your opinion, if you had been receiving $25,000, $30,000 a year in donations, and then you received a $200,000 donation, your testimony is that you would embark on an investigation as to the origins of the donor, correct?
Well, there was a policy on the acceptance of gifts in 2016.
There was a policy on acceptance of gifts in.
But the policy at the time mentioned that the president of the foundation had to obtain legal advice with regard to the contract itself and the origin of the donors. So there was a policy. We made it to the next level, if I can say, and we also adopted in 2018 a policy on responsible investment, which I'm really proud of. But there was a policy in place that required that this kind of background check be conducted.
So with more specificity, this is not a traditional foundation. This is a foundation named after a former prime minister whose son is the current prime minister. From a governance standpoint, to ensure that you are beyond reproach, what special policies are implemented within the board level governance to ensure that there's no perception of foreign interference or foreign influence, i.e., the use of the name for purposes that might provide a foreign interest? Did you have any consideration around that in your risk analysis?
Well, under my leadership, what I would do was to conduct that kind of in-depth research, not myself. Again, I'm a firm believer in independence of the process. So I had a law firm who would come back to me with what they found, and then I would go back to the development committee and then back to the board to say, I will go ahead with that donation. This is the risk analysis that was conducted. I was conscious of the name and the perception that individuals might have regarding the name, and I was exceptionally careful with regard to donations. I cannot comment on the past, obviously, but I can tell you that there was a policy in place.
But you would also have to have that consideration given that the Prime Minister's brother was an active member of the board as well, understanding our conflict of interest rules and code of ethics within Parliament, correct?
Yes, it is correct.
So, you freeze the money, essentially. You don't use it because you're not comfortable with a foreign entity using your organization's name to further foreign interests through academic conferences and the like. Is that correct?
We did not touch the money because the only way to touch the money was to organize these lectures around China, which had nothing to do with my mandate. So I had adopted a brand new strategic plan. We were going.
Was it the mandate before you were there?
We were not going to China, and we were not doing anything with regard to China.
Was it part of the previous mandate when you took on the organization? Did you see within the mandate the board governance? So this is brand new.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a reasonable person looking at this could suggest that a $200,000 donation to the Trudeau Foundation for the purposes of furthering Chinese interests in Canadian academic spaces could be either interference or influence. Would that be fair to say?
Well, if I may just answer very quickly, the Pierre Trudeau Foundation is about academic knowledge. So one of the key themes is Canada and the world. So we could imagine having, conferences around China, Brazil, Brussels. It could be done in an academic milieu. I don't see a problem with that. The problem to me was, what was done in terms of the background check regarding these donors. And I had many questions, and I wanted the law firm to help me.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Green. So that concludes our first round. We're going to our second round now, and I am going to start. Monsieur Villemure.
I would like to table the motion that we invite Mr. Johnson.
Has the motion been circulated, Madam Clerk, or no? Okay. So just un moment, s'il vous plaît, Monsieur Villemure. Monsieur Villemure, quand vous avez la parole.
Mr. Villemure, you can share your motion again when you have the floor. A point of order is not a time to table a motion. So if you want to wait just a moment. And now we'll give the floor to Ms. Thomas for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Ms. Fournier, I'm curious, if you were to point us to those who have the most pertinent voices with regards to this matter, who are the most important people that we should be hearing from at this committee?
Great question. The vice chair of the board of director who has resigned, Diane Ada, a former language commissioner here for 10 years, she was asked to actually become the chair from a legal standpoint, was approached by our lawyers, and they asked her, given the fact that the current chair was there at the time and was actually the chair of the audit committee, it would be good for you to become the chair of how to handle that matter. So I think it would be very important to hear from her, given the fact that the lawyers contacted her and had asked her to take a proactive role. Diane Ada. I would also mention the board members who have resigned together on that day. I think it would be very important for you to hear from them, given the fact that we had an emergency meeting on March 31st and they resigned 10 days later. So to hear from them about the motion that they circulated and how it went in their opinion.
Okay. Earlier you said that you had items that were taken from you, is the word that you used. I'm wondering when that happened. When were the items that you were using in your role as CEO, when were they taken from you?
So I resigned on Monday, April 10th, and on the day, it was the end of the day, when I resigned, I sent a letter to the board members and to the members, and on that day, immediately, they shut down my email access so that I couldn't reach out to the scholars, fellows, and mentors to explain to them that I was resigning. So that's the first aspect. And the day after, if I remember correctly, it was the day after, or I'm pretty sure it was the day after, the foundation asked the IT individual to come to my house to take my computer, my iPhone, the internet access that I had. So I bought a new, phone and computer and so on. But they asked me not to keep any documentation, anything that I had access to. So in order for me to come to you today, I had almost nothing. I have annual reports that are public. I have some documents that are of a public nature. I did ask for a few emails from individuals who had received them, if they could send it to me so that at least I could speak to you today. But I do not have all of the information that I had at the time, yes.
Thank you. I'm curious, they came to your house. Is that customary?
I don't know if it is custom, but what they mention is that because they were paying for my phone, my computer, and my internet, so they were at my house from 6 o'clock until 12 at night, 12:30, to make sure that they would leave with everything, any possible, access to computers, iPhones, and internet, and so on. They insisted on the fact that they wanted to read all of the text messages and that I was not allowed to touch any of the text messages. And so I did collaborate and obviously gave back everything that I had. So you will understand that I don't have access to almost nothing. I remember a lot from memory, but I had some individuals who sent back some emails so that I could testify today.
Thank you. I'm just going to touch base on the donation being returned. You said that a check was written and that a check was delivered. Was a check cashed?
No. So the check that was sent had to be actually received physically from the donors themselves, right? So that's how it works. So you send something and you cannot just give the check to anybody. So the donors themselves were not there from March 1st until March 23rd. So they attempted several times to go and find the donors so that they could take the check and really take the money, and they could not find them.
So to this day, it hasn't actually been returned.
Well, what happened when it was returned, I did receive legal advice not to give back the money and actually to have that forensic audit, unrestricted forensic audit, to understand everything regarding that donation, with the possibility that the donors are not themselves the real donors. All of that had to be understood with experts. So I did find the experts.
Merci, Madame Fournier. Thank you, Ms. Thomas.
When I was there, no.
Sorry, that concludes the round. We're a little over time here. La prochaine intervention.
Next we have Ms. Martinez-Ferrada. 5 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Fournier, for being with us here today. A few quick questions. I would like to come back to your ethics background. Did you participate in any partisan activities while you were CEO and president? And when you were examining donations and reports and you arrive as CEO, you examined previous reports, you created a new strategic plan, so you examined what happened before you arrived. And a person who is going to manage such a foundation would look at what happened before they arrived. Were there any partisan activities that you were able to notice and funds spent by the foundation to participate in activities? When I arrived in July 2018, there were almost no employees left at the foundation. I want to mention that. There were no employees. There was no team. And so I had to quickly hire people. I had nobody working communication, nobody working finance. So you examined the political background of all the people that you hired? Were you able to verify if these people were associated to a political party or not? I verified what I could legally as a former Commissioner of Human Rights. Were you able to see if people had made donations to political parties? Donations are public, so you'd be able to see if people had made donations. Did you do a background check to see if they had done political donations, made political donations? Have you made a donation to a political party? No. So for the donation that the foundation received, were you subject to any pressure in order to organize conferences on Canada and China? No. And from the association that made that donation, did you receive an email or a letter asking you to organize these conferences? No. In your strategic plan and academically, did you receive any pressure to include studies on Canada and China? The strategic plan had nothing to do with Canada and China. So you were never forced, you never felt obligated to respond or to create conferences on Canada and China? No. So the government in power since 2015, have you seen any emails that were asking the foundation to organize such conferences or asking the foundation to create an event following the donation? I found it strange, actually. If a donation is made and you say, here is $70,000 in 2016, I'm forcing you to organize a conference, there was nothing like that. Did you have an obligation to choose academics from the Chinese community? No. So was the process for choosing fellows protected? Yes. So there was no interference since your arrival. Since 2018, I can assure you that the president of the committee and all members, there was no interference. And can you tell us today if, while you were president, if certain people from the board or any members made any pressure to participate in political events? Were you invited to participate in political events? No. I did not receive any such invitations, and I did not participate in any political events. You have 5 seconds. Thank you.
Yeah, Madame.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez-Ferrada.
We're going to go to Mr. Villemure next, but I am going to advise the committee that in light of the information from Mr. Alexandre Trudeau of his desire to come and speak publicly to a committee, I had the clerk send out an invitation to Mr. Trudeau for next Wednesday. So we have set aside time from 4:30 to 6:30 next Wednesday afternoon. Madam Clerk, we have confirmed the time for a committee meeting, given the availability of Mr. Trudeau. So I just want to advise the committee that I took my prerogative as chair to take him up on his offer to come and speak to a parliamentary committee. Monsieur Villemure, vous avez...
Mr. Villemeur, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to propose the following motion. The interpreter would like to note that he is reading very quickly and she does not have it. Please read more slowly because the interpreters don't have your motion and it's difficult when you speak too quickly. I apologize that interpreters listen slowly. That on their study, that in the context of its study on foreign interference and threats to the integrity of democratic institutions, intellectual property, and the Canadian state, the Committee A calls Edward Johnson, founding member of the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation, for a 2-hour session as soon as possible. The motion was sent in both official languages to the clerk.
Okay, merci, Monsieur Villemeur.
Thank you, Mr. Villemeur. The motion is in order. Madam Clerk, do you have the motion? And it was shared with all members in both official languages. Mr. Villemeur, on your motion, would you like to speak? I had asked the question to Ms. Fournier. We've been talking about board members, and we named the 3 people who stayed and 2 other people, but we did not speak a lot about Mr. Johnson. And because he's been there since the very beginning of the foundation, I think that he would be a privileged witness. And he could explain, for example, why there were no employees in 2017, the context of the donation, why he did not want to recuse himself when proper ethical practices would require it. I think that he would be a central witness that we should hear from. Thank you, Mr. Villemeur.
La motion.
Oh, OK.
Donnez-moi juste un instant, je vais juste vérifier mes courriels pour
OK.
pour m'assurer
Madame
si
Gaffney.
c'est possible.
Cherchez pour ça, Monsieur Fergus. Je pense que c'est une motion que c'est très simple.
I think that it's quite a simple motion.
Okay. Do we have any further discussion on Mr. Villemeur? I don't see any. Do we have consensus? Mr. Fergus? Okay, we have consensus. Merci, Monsieur Villemeur.
Thank you, Mr. Villemeur. You have the floor. Go ahead. 2.5 minutes. Thank you. You talked about Mr. Johnson and that he's been there since the beginning. And according to you, what do you believe his ties are with the Trudeau family? Mr. Johnson worked for Pierre Elliott Trudeau as executive assistant. And so he knows the children, Alexandre, Justin. He's known them since they were children and stayed close to the family. He has a great affection for the Trudeau family. And so I know that when they were children, he would go canoeing with them. He told me stories, and that there was trust that was built over the years. Apologies for interrupting you. Would you say that, and I'll take this, the expression, would he risk his life to protect them? Would he take a bullet for them? I enjoyed working with him, and I wasn't present during times where he was close to the family, but I do know that he is. And you mentioned that when you arrived, there were almost no employees, and the board was renewed around 2017. A lot of people left. Why did they leave? I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly. I know that it was very heated when Mr. Rosenberg left, and a lot of board members left at that same time. And there was a person who was named by the board in order to be in crisis management for about 9 months. And so some were forced to leave, and there were almost no employees when I arrived. Isabelle Hudon, for example, who is somebody who was close to Justin Trudeau, who stepped down. I don't think she was part of the board at the time, but she was a guest. I thought I saw that in the annual report. She was a guest at one of our conferences, but I could be wrong, but I don't believe she was there at the time. In 2018, at the beginning of my mandate, I knew that I wanted to travel through Canada, and I wanted us to focus on diversity of members, of fellows and mentors. I wanted us to represent Canada, have a regional race and gender diversity, and we wanted people in the board who would represent diversity at all levels in Canada. So in 2018, we had an impressive arrival of very diverse people, and these are the same people who left on April 10th with me.
Merci.
Thank you.
I do want to pick up on something that Mr. Villemure said, Madame Fournier, before I go to Mr. Green. Was Mr. Rosenberg fired from the foundation for his role in the donation?
I was not there at the time, and I cannot answer that question.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Green, 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go back to kind of your early analysis of the donation. You would have been seized with it. Obviously, you took great steps in your leadership role. In your estimation, what was the relationship between Mr. Zhang Bing and the government of the People's Republic of China?
Well, what I did notice was that he was the chair of the board of that association based in China. So that association was in relationship with the government. He was the chair of that association, and he was one of the donors. That's all I have in terms of it. I don't have more information than that.
Is it fair to say that the association was an extension of the People's Republic of China, of the government?
I think the proximity, there was a very strong proximity. I don't know if I would say extension, but it was clearly under the guidance, I think was the expression used on their website, under the guidance of the government.
And the association was the one providing the direction on the details of the donation. Is that correct? The same
Correct.
Association?
Correct, yes.
And so one could infer then, through that line of reasoning, that there would have been guidance from the People's Republic of China on dealing with the matters related to this particular donation?
Possibly. That's why I wanted to have an unrestricted forensic audit to understand what happened before I became president and CEO of the foundation.
Is there anything that you would have done differently, knowing what you know now?
Yes. At the time when we gave back, the money to the donors, I was under the impression that there was not this relationship with the government of China or that association and all of these emails. The check that we sent back was signed by the two board members, Peter Salas and Bruce McNiven. I did believe this was the right course of action at the time. It is later on that I found out about these different emails, and the more that I did research, the more I wanted to do an investigation and not to touch the money anymore, and to have that unrestricted forensic audit was very important to me.
Ms. Fournier, I want to give you the opportunity, subsequent to this meeting, there's going to be further testimony. There's probably going to be some responses to the statements that you've made. I want to invite you to have, under parliamentary privilege, the opportunity to reply to this committee in writing should you feel that you are being maligned or misrepresented in any ways. I just wanted to extend that invitation to you.
What you mention right now, because it is, I did not ask to come to testify. I do it out of good faith, and I believe in transparency and in democracy. But I really did make sure that nothing I was saying to you today could be used against me, and that this privilege is not just in theory, but that in practice I don't receive any intimidation or attempts to attack my reputation. I want to mention that I was just renewed for 2 more years with an impeccable record at the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation. So I surely hope that there's not an attempt to try to say something else about me. My entire career has been built around my reputation of integrity and transparency.
Okay, and we'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Green, go ahead.
as you know, I did have a motion that I wanted to
That was
put.
tabled earlier, yes.
Yeah,
My
and it's
understanding,
an
my understanding is that the motion has been distributed in
Okay,
both
perfect.
official languages to all members
you.
of the committee. We did agree to table that earlier, so
Thank
I
you.
will take it up. But before I do, Mr. Green, I do want to say thank you to our witness today for coming forward. And I want to reiterate what Mr. Green said. You came here today under summons from this committee, Madame Fournier. If at any point, you feel intimidated, threatened in any way, I want you to advise me as the chair through the clerk of any of those circumstances. I'm also aware as well, because I saw a tweet about trying to malign your character in your role as the president and CEO of the foundation, and it was floated out there for anybody in the media to contact, or anybody who had felt that you had maligned or not conducted yourself in any way in a professional manner. It was floated out there by the media to contact them, and I actually was quite disturbed by that. That would happen. So I want that assurance to be made to you, that this committee will do everything we can, not just to protect your privilege, but also to ensure that your character is maintained and that you're not intimidated as a result of your appearance today. So I want to make that very clear as chair, so thank you.
So much.
Okay, thank you, Madame Fournier. I'm going to dismiss you now, and appreciate, on behalf of the committee and on behalf of Canadians, for you being here today and for your stellar work in all aspects of your life. Thank you.
Much.
Okay.
Merci tout le monde. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, everyone.
I'm going to go to you now, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I move that the committee order the production of all documents in possession of Pascal Fournier related to the matters currently being studied by this committee, and specifically concerning certain donations received by the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation, provided that these documents shall be deposited with the clerk of the committee within 2 business days and shall be circulated to the members of the committee on a confidential or in-camera basis once they've been translated into both official languages.
Thank you, Mr. Green. The motion is in order. It's been circulated in both official languages among all members of the committee by the clerk. Any questions, comments? I don't see any. Do we have consensus? We do. Okay, we do. Thank you so much. That concludes the meeting for today. I want to thank the clerk, who I know, and I will say this, has been under a tremendous amount of pressure to ensure that we get everything in order today. So I want to say thank you to the clerk, thank you to the analysts, thank you to all the technicians, members of committee, and Madame Fournier. The meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.